Stewie, saw some stats about expected score on the weekend, which had you well in front. How do you review that?
No, look, we just look where we can get better. I think it's a dangerous one, expected score, because you can't take it when it looks good and then ignore it when it's bad. So certainly within here, we're more concerned with just how the game looked and how close it was to what we wanted to play. And obviously we were inconsistent, challenged early and then challenged late, still able to fight it out. And unfortunately we missed a couple of shots there late that would have made it interesting and quite tight. So a little bit frustrating in that regard.
What are the main areas that one of the main areas that you're looking at?
Well, I think in those conditions, your foundational habits and skills, I guess, get blown up in lights. And I think we, at different times, over handballed or coughed up the football under, some pressure, but a little bit of perceived pressure as well. And they were a little bit cleaner in those moments. Took meterage by foot more than us. And once we adjusted that, and at times when we were clean, we saw what we could do. So really feel like, as simple as it is in those conditions, when you fumble and cough up the ball, often you can get caught offside and that team will punish.
Obviously different conditions, probably third week in a row that you kind of had that pressure, or it's Josh described the skills as horrendous after the Bulldogs game, you kind of had that kind of hurt you.
Yeah, and we just keep working at it, I guess. That's the... And again, to not go week to week on what we're after, we need to get better at that across as a whole and into the future. So it's certainly not one thing that will shine a light on one week. And as we say, like the foundation stuff, that needs to be just done as part of routine, and we're doing that. Quite often it comes out last on the ground. So certainly, not knocking the door down, working on it, but looking for it to come out more consistently.
About the physical toll, can you just give us some insight into how recovery differs and what that toll is like from playing up there than a normal game here?
A little bit in the short term, but then you bounce back pretty quick. They're very fit. It can get a bit overstated in terms of the toll that can take on you and physically, and certainly much around hydration and refueling and getting good sleep. So in some ways the game can be a little bit slower due to the conditions, particularly late. So in terms of miles in the legs, it's okay, and just making sure that I guess early in the week and by now refuel and rest up and get ready to go again.
What do you make of the midfield? I guess how you fed in the midfield. I guess then you won clearances in the end, but it probably didn't really reflect, I guess, when the game was ended.
Yeah, we won clearances and scores and meterage from stoppage, but it was really on the outnumber on the next possession. So we felt that their midfield beat us on that outnumber in the next play. So, yeah, certainly some things to work on. And Carlton, in that regard, that's one of their strengths, certainly from clearance to the next play. So we need to make sure we put a bit of work into that and bring that focus for this week to get it right. But certainly that was one area where we can't be happy with just a clearance number. We've got to get the next play right.
When you have that, Zach obviously quite, he stood up, he probably didn't have enough guys, help him out there. How do you address that? Can you pull more people in? Do you have personnel you can bring in there to help out, or how do you kind of address that?
Yeah, we can share the load. I mean, quite often when you look at players, I guess the team's best midfielder always does stand out. So I don't think anyone's not helping Zach out. We certainly put a lot of work to help him out to play that way as well. So, I think part of that will be making sure we share the load as well. And Zach's going to compete no matter what. We know that. We've seen that physically, and some of his contests on the weekend were quite brutal and really setting the tone. So, no, we do need to grow our midfield depth for sure. So, when he's on rotation or other players are in there, we need to get some more players, some more flying hours in there, and we'll work out what that looks like for the second half of the year.
You've done very well focusing on process and getting that message out there, and but you're on the wrong side of the win-loss ledger. Is that frustrating?
No, because we can see. I guess our percentage probably points to where we're competitive and in games, and although from a ladder position we'd love to be a little bit higher and win a couple more of those close ones. I think certainly internally and from a coaching group point of view and team, we're pretty clear on where we're at and where we need to get better. And I've been impressed with Kari's ability to stay disciplined on on that way and the message he's driving around the process, because we know that, with some players that we've got, they're getting some great experiences and we're seeing some good results. I thought Berry played one of his better games. Ewan McKinlay, it's probably a good example of doing a power of work on his ball security and goal kicking, and then he has a moment like that in tough conditions. So they should get some of those younger players should get some good belief out of that.
So following on that holistically, in terms of how you measure things internally and putting aside win-loss, are you where you expected to be at in terms of the way the group or individuals are performing as well? How do you rate the season so far, almost at the halfway point?
Look, I'd say inconsistent in that when we get it looking how we want, getting players as close to what output we think they can do, we're a really strong side. Defensively, I feel like we've been quite tight. There's the moments, 6 minutes to go in the second quarter where teams get a run on. How can we stop that quicker? And these are conversations all teams are having. But if we worry about ourselves, we're looking to what leaders can influence in those moments. And I think at different times we are trying to grow our on-field leadership as well and empower the players to make decisions, dictate speed of ball. That was one we got a bit wrong on the weekend. At different times we went far too quick when we weren't set up forward of the ball. So just the modes of the game and really feeling the speed of the game and controlling that.
Carlton showed on Saturday that when groups connect, they can almost achieve everything, anything possible. Are you sort of wary of that? Do you have to remind the group that this isn't the team that maybe has been earlier in the season? Yeah,
and I think it's an interesting position. There's always a spike because everyone probably feels a little bit less pressure on the whole club itself, but any team can win on their day. And I think my kids do tips, and I'll tell them to forget everything that's happened the weeks before and make a decision on what's in front of you, because if you read into ladder position or scoreboards from the week before, it's just too long away. So it's a new week for us, and we want to make sure we accelerate into this game and bring some real intensity.
So are you interested in head coaching jobs anymore, just in context of Carlton, obviously in the hunt? I think it appears every assistant coach gets asked it, but yeah.
Look, the short answer is no, in terms of my focus at the moment is here and what we're trying to do. And look, if down in the future that conversation was to be had, I'll worry about it then. But I must admit, I've got great empathy for Michael. Obviously, having been in his position, I think he handled himself unbelievable throughout the last 12, 18 months. And I find it really quite frustrating that the same people that were, chipping away at Michael are the first ones to highlight how good he's been. So that probably is my thoughts on that situation.
So you wouldn't rule it out if Carlton came knocking towards the end of the season?
No, I wouldn't even think about it. And they'll do their own processes, and I'm sure the way clubs operate, they've already done their processes.
Miles told us last week after surgery that he was fearful it would be upwards of 12 weeks. Have you got an update after the surgery?
Yeah, no, I need to get an update on that, because I've seen 4 to 6 and I've seen 10 to 12. So having got back from Darwin, I'd love some clarity. And so when we have our medical meeting this afternoon, but as I'm aware, generally these ones, there's a couple of weeks where he'll be in an unattractive moon boot. And once he gets out of that, we'll have a bit more clarity on where he looks.
Given the fact you took basically the whole squad to Darwin, or a lot of them, including Tommy Cochran and that type of thing, given there wasn't sand for those, is it more likely it's less change than more?
Not necessarily. I think, there's obviously Josh Lai we anticipate will come out of protocols, and Jonesy's gone into them. And I think one game's okay, and sometimes players might need a bit of a circuit breaker as well. So certainly those selection discussions will happen based on what team we think can beat Carlton on the weekend.